Hello and welcome to another episode of RN Cliff Notes. And I am Cliff Davis, Associate Dean of Nursing and Advanced Medical Surgical Professor. All right, and what are we doing? We are helping students to see through larger concepts by studying smart. All right, so let's jump right in. And of course, you should have your pen and paper or pencil and paper or whatever it is you want to use to be prepared to record something. Why? Because this is RN Cliff Notes. All right, yeah. So, 3 fluid tonicities. I need you to identify them. Go. Okay? So, pause the video if you need. If the fluid tonicity is higher than blood, what is it? If it's the same as blood, what is it? And of course, lower than blood. And you should have the following as the answers if you watched the first video. Your answer should be hypertonic, hyper, higher tonicity than blood. Isotonic, like an isosceles triangle, right? 2 sides are equal. Iso, the same tonicity as blood. Hypotonic, it has a tonicity that is lower than blood. Hypo. All right, good. Now, more to our little video quiz here. Now I need you to identify our IV fluid trinity. This is paramount to our understanding the tonicities of IV fluid. What is our IV fluid trinity? Okay, so you're naming those 3 isotonics we build off of. And you should have the following, right? We said in the previous video, what helps us to remember it? Sugar, salt, right? For example, so sugar and salt, dextrose, 5% in water. That's what that 5 is for, D5W. And then we have, right, our salt, 0.9% is our isotonic normal saline, salt. And then that leaves us with lactated ringers, which we also learned about in the previous video. Good. So our isotonic trinity, now we build off of that. And as we build off of that, we want to bear in mind the following rules, which are, anytime that you combine 2 isotonic fluids, they become what? Hypertonic. So D5W plus LR, D5LR, and D5W plus NS, D5NS, they both become what? Hypertonic. Anytime you stack 2 isotonics on top of each other in the same bag, we're talking about a hypertonic solution. All right? Good. Now, let's try you out. And I need you to identify the tonicities of the following IV fluids. And for this segment, we're focusing on salts. So identify those tonicities. And if you saw the first video, you should be able to knock this out. All right. And pause the video if need be. Okay. So we've got hypertonic. Why? Because 0.9%. Not quite 1. 0.9% is isotonic. And if we say 3%, that's over 3 times as concentrated as our isotonic version. So, right, that becomes hypertonic. Likewise, 5%, over 5 times as strong, or 5 times as concentrated as our isotonic saline, which was just 0.9%, so less than 1. Then now, that brings us to these guys, which in both instances, they are less than 0.9%. So that makes them hypotonic, respectively. Okay, good. So that was our run with the salts. Now, let's do a run here with our sugars. And go for it. So on your papers, or in your phone, or something, write it down. Okay, good. So, and we've got the following answers, which are, remember our rule? If we combine 2 isotonics, what happened? It became hypertonic. Well, that rule still holds true, even though we've decreased our concentration of sodium chloride here. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky, right? So D5 and half normal saline, 0.45, his other name is half normal saline, is still hypertonic. Yeah. Then D10W. Well, wait a minute. Let's let that register. Because when we're talking about our isotonic, what do we call it? D5W? So that was dextrose, what, 5% in water? This time it's dextrose, what, 10% in water. So it's twice as concentrated. And that would be what? Hypertonic. Okay? All right, now you're getting it. And then D50. Okay. D50 is like straight pancake syrup. It is, oof, it's thick. Right? And we use that when a person's going into insulin shock or something, right? D50. All right, good, good. All right, now, the next thing we want to do, as we spoke about when we started the video, we want to take you down to the cellular level this time so that you have a greater understanding of, now that you know the fluids and their tonicities, what kind of impact do they have on cells, right? But before we get into that, and cells change in size and things, let's look at what's going on inside and outside the cell. All right. So for those that aren't familiar with this, when we say ECF, that's extracellular fluid. What's that? That's fluid that's all around the outside of a cell. So we see ECF out here. And then ICF, intracellular fluid. That's the fluid that's inside the cell. And we realize that cells are microcosms, are smaller versions of us. And we're mainly what? Water. Cells are also mainly water. And, okay, what we want to do, we took a slice of the cell membrane and put it here to just help out our understanding. Okay, so cell membrane, right? Outside the cell membrane, what was it? ECF, extracellular fluid. Inside the cell membrane, ICF, right? Intracellular fluid. Now, this next concept that I want to teach you will stick with you once you understand that. So, this concept is something I teach my students as they're learning the laboratory shorthand, or what we call fish bones. And since we're learning about fish bones, I thought it'd be kind of cool if we also call this concept Pisces, like the fish, right? So as we're learning Pisces, what do we learn from Pisces? P-I-S-E, Pisces. So, potassium is the dominant electrolyte in the intracellular environment, whereas sodium is the dominant electrolyte in the extracellular fluid. Now, we said dominant, not that that's the only one, right? So you got smaller amounts of other electrolytes. However, the dominant, the prevailing one, is potassium what? In the ICF, sodium in the ECF. Now, we also color-coded it so you understand. Sodium, of course, Na, sodium, and potassium what? K. But then, as you let that concept settle in your mind, you also remember, back to your earlier studies, right? You were taught about the what? Sodium-potassium pump. Yeah, when it came to cells and the movement of electrolytes in and out of a cell was due to the sodium-potassium pump. And this is the basis of that at the cellular level, right? So this will boost your understanding of electrolytes. Yeah, Pisces. Okay. Now, we want to take a look at what I call the cellular 3 S's. The 3 S's. The 3 S's of fluid tonicity. And what that's getting at is, if a fluid happens to be hypertonic, right? Too concentrated. That would be greater than 300. Okay? What kind of action does it have on the cell? Causes cells to shrink. We'll see that in a moment. Then if the fluid is isotonic, what, the same as blood? Then that range 275 to 295. That's in red because it's important come test time. All right? Yeah. All right, then what happens? The cell stays the same size. I don't know, it sounds like a tongue twister. Okay. And then we got, right, hypotonic. So less than 270, and it causes cells to swell. But let's take a look at that, because that's like a lot of information. So, right, first up, so on this side, we've got our normal size cell. On this side, we're demonstrating the action of the cell right underneath this description. So, when we're talking about hypertonic, right, hypertonic solution, we said greater than 300. Again, we're seeing our magic number that we learned about, 3, right? So if it's greater than 300, what does it do? It causes the cell to shrink in size. All right? Yeah. So, but now let's give that to you on another level. Okay, here it comes. So if you got your cell inside of your vein, let's say, and outside of the cell, there's a greater amount of salt. Because we're saying the solution is what? Hypertonic. If there's a greater amount of salt outside the cell, let's get ourselves a cell here. If there's a greater amount of salt outside the cell, then all of this salt out here is going to pull fluid out of the cell. And what does that do? Cause the cell to shrink because it's losing its water to the surrounding fluid. And that shrinking we refer to as crenation, when blood cells shrink, right? All that salt, what happens when you got a lot of salt? Water wants to follow salt. So if all of the salt is out here, what happens? The cell gives up its water and shrinks in size, or crenates. Great. Okay. So hypertonic fluids cause shrinking of cells. And isotonic, right? Then that says that what? The same concentration of salt that's inside the cell is the same concentration of salt that's outside the cell. So what happens to the cell? It doesn't change its size. It remains the same. Our second S. So we had shrinking at first. Now we're at what? The same. All right, good. 275 to 295. Important. Okay, then now we want to talk about something a fluid that is hypotonic. If it's hypotonic, that says that what? There's less salt out here in the ECF. Then now, there's more salt inside the cell. And what does the cell do? Pull fluid inside. It pulls water into itself. And what happens? It swells. Our third S, swelling of the cell as a result of the cell having a higher concentration of salt. And we said water wants to follow that salt. So it does. And it goes inside that cell, and that cell swells up and gets bigger. So fantastic, right? Yeah. Less than 270. Hey, you're learning lots. Okay, now, for that other piece that I promised you. Okay, bear with me on this part. It'll be kind of rough. Okay, so what I want you to do is pay attention to all of these snacks. All right, these pictures that I put here. Okay, now let's think about those snacks that we eat. Let's tell the truth about these snacks, okay? And that's what I'm going to teach you. If you tell the truth about the snacks, you'll fully understand this serum osmolality calculation in terms of the numbers, okay? So, if we think about our snacks, ready? I know, here it comes, right? So, usually our snacks are what? Pretzels, chips, these kinds of things, what do they have? Twice the amount of sodium that they should have in order to be healthy, right? We don't need that much salt. So, twice the sodium. And then some of these other sugary snacks, what's going on? They're loaded with glucose, right? And other sugars. And when it comes to snacks, what happened? Underneath it all, what happened? You are the one that ate it. Okay, yeah, I know. Yeah, okay, bear with me. Okay, plus plus, right? Here it comes. After you eat all of that, what happens to your buns? They get bigger, and you want to have them decreased by 3. So there you have it. So 2 times the sodium, more than we need. When it comes to glucose, you're the one that ate it, and the buns, you know about it, and we're dividing them by 3, hopefully, right? Good. So you crunch all of those numbers, and what do you wind up with? The serum osmolality. And on your paper, what was the normal range again? Scribble that down. What was the normal range of serum osmolality? And you say, what do you say? All right? And yes, 275 to 295. Not quite that magic number 300. Once we hit that and go over it, we're talking about something that's hypertonic. Hey, look at you, learning, right? Good job, guys. Hey, that's it. Thank you for subscribing and liking, and tune in to the next video. Thanks again. Study smart.